Electrified vehicles are generally more expensive than their petrol and diesel counterparts. However, the MG3 Hybrid Plus does come in at an alluring price point. £18,500 if you want the entry-level SE model, or £20,500 if you want the top-spec trophy model, which we have on review. Now in this video you can see if it's actually worth its price tag, and of course if its hybrid powertrain does provide you good sort of efficiency. So to kick things off, let's talk about the electrification of the MG3 Hybrid Plus. And here you have got a 1.83 kilowatt hour battery pack, when in reality you've got 0.92 kilowatt hour, which is actually usable. I find it fascinating that you've not got the means of switching between pure EV mode and, let's say, hybrid mode, but rather the vehicle will automatically determine for itself what is best for you. You'll be able to notice this if you glance down towards the instrument cluster and if you go on the appropriate mode. Indeed, over here, the engine can power the front wheels, or it can simultaneously charge the battery pack while you're on the move. You can have the battery pack power the electric motor, and you can also have the battery pack, the electric motor, and the engine all running in parallel. Now, this is all very fascinating and cool to see, but what does it actually translate to? Well, the manufacturer claims that you'll get roughly 64 mpg, and in reality, my mixed driving test netted 55 to 60 mpg, which is actually pretty impressive, not only because it's close to the manufacturer's claim, but if you do look at some of its competitors and look at the overall price point of the MG, it does actually fare very well. Indeed, it far outclasses some of its main rivals and even more expensive alternatives. Now, in terms of the total driving range that you should be able to attain with that sort of fuel efficiency, it sits at roughly 400 to 450 miles on a full tank of petrol, and that is thanks to the fact that you've got a 36-litre fuel tank. Now, better still, and something that yet again sets itself aside from other hybrid vehicles out there on the market, is that you've got 3 regenerative braking modes. Now, normally I don't really emphasize this in a vehicle because you'd come to kind of expect it in a fully electric vehicle, but in hybrid vehicles, you either don't have the choice or you've only got a singular regenerative braking mode. Well, here MG have really outdone themselves, because right now we're on level 2 mode. I'm driving at 20 miles an hour, and if I were to lift off the accelerator pedal, the vehicle starts decelerating. Now I'm just going to come to a complete standstill because there's a vehicle kind of honing it down pretty fast around the country lanes. And now as I regain speed, I'll go back to 20 miles an hour, except this time I'll shift to level 3 mode. And if I do lift off again, the vehicle will start decelerating a lot faster. Now, if you do not like that and you don't want that sort of behavior, you can go on level 1 mode, and that's not quite like coasting, but it's somewhat like it. Now, yet again, if I just lift off, the vehicle kind of coasts, but there's still a little bit of regenerative braking which is occurring. Now, in case you're wondering, I've set the star button on the steering wheel to switch between the regenerative braking modes, which is a setting that you can set via the infotainment system. So yet again, good thinking by the manufacturer, because it gives that degree of customization. And on a side note, it is worth noting that the regenerative braking mode level 2 will automatically come on as a default. So therefore, every single time you power on the vehicle, it'll be level 2 mode. So if you want level 1 or level 3 mode, you'll have to switch it every single time. So with efficiency out of the way, let's talk about performance. And here the MG3 Hybrid Plus is a pocket rocket. Now, there are 3 different driving modes you can choose from: Eco, Normal or Sport, with the latter actually giving you the most sort of responsive feel. Now, at the front of the vehicle, you've got a 4-cylinder 1.5-litre engine, which in itself outputs 75 kilowatts of power, or 100 horsepower, and 128 newton meters of torque. Then you've got the electric motor, which produces 100 kilowatts of power, or 134 horsepower, and 250 newton meters of torque. According to the manufacturer, combined, this means that the vehicle outputs 143 kilowatts of power, or 192 horsepower, and 425 newton meters of torque. Now, using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch, I had it tested from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 2.14 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 3.22 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 6.9 seconds, 50 to 70 miles an hour in just 4.1 seconds, and a peak acceleration of 0.46 Gs. As for its top speed, it clocks in at 106 miles an hour, which should certainly suffice for the vast majority of consumers, although will leave certain people disappointed who live near unrestricted roads. Now, while that's all very well and good, it is worth pointing out that the MG3 Hybrid Plus has got a 3-speed automatic transmission, and there's actually no means of adjusting it on the fly. Furthermore, it kind of sounds like a CVT. If I put my foot down to the metal, Indeed, the vehicle really ramps up in terms of noise. Now, that shouldn't really matter to a lot of individuals, although it's worth pointing out that between 60 and 70 miles an hour, for example, if you're on the motorway doing an overtaking maneuver, you might notice that the vehicle kind of hesitates a little bit and then regains speed. I did notice a similar sort of behavior in the MG HS plug-in hybrid, and I haven't noticed it in any of its competitors, so just some food for thought. Now, in terms of the overall driver's feel, the steering wheel does feel a little bit disjointed, even in terms of on its sport mode preset, so you'll just have to be mindful about that if you're a bit of a spirited driver. Furthermore, it has got a front-wheel drive configuration only, so therefore won't offer the all-wheel drive traction of the more expensive alternatives out there on the market. Again, maybe a bit of a redundant point to make, but something just worth noting in case you're comparing, contrasting, and let's say comparing deals which might be a little bit similar. As for the overall braking performance, it is actually relatively good for a vehicle of its class, and I've got no real complaints. Now, more importantly is its suspension system. Sure enough, there's a bit of body roll if you're going to be chucking around winding country routes, and it doesn't exactly feel as engaging as I mentioned before, but when it comes to be pottering around town, well, here it'll soak up a lot of the anomalies, the potholes and the speed bumps. And given the fact that the vehicle is kind of suited for that, I feel that MG have done a good job of tuning the suspension to be a little bit soft. However, the overall materials which are used within the cabin aren't exactly all that good, and therefore it does impact the overall driving comfort. The overall cabin noise itself is actually not too bad, and the overall design of the interior is actually pretty nice, specifically at this price point, but there is a little bit of rattle that can be heard, be it when you're traversing at lower speeds towards the front of the cabin from the plastic materials, or even if you're traversing at higher speeds, and if you've not plugged in the seat belts and you don't have anyone sitting at the back, you'll hear the rattle coming from the rear of the cabin, and as a result it's actually constantly vibrating on the plastic trim that's found towards the side. Seatbelt runners would have actually avoided this, but of course you can buy some aftermarket accessories in order to avoid this from actually occurring, at least if you do go for the MG3 Hybrid Plus. Now, elsewhere, there are certain design things which I'm not really sure about, if it's to do with this press vehicle or it's just generally when it comes to manufacturing. And here I do have to talk about the instrument cluster. And while it's very much appreciated that you have a fully digitalized 7-inch display, which provides you all the detailed information that you'll require, and it's somewhat customizable, it is slightly angled away from the driver, as in towards where the window is. Equally over here, it does feel a little bit lopsided. It's almost like the manufacturing is a little bit off over here. Then a small little point as well that I should make is that the door locking buttons, which is found towards the side of the driver, are also angled away from the driver. Now, this is not exactly a big deal, but when you're driving at night, the small little illuminated orange light, which is over here, reflects off the window and almost makes you think there is the blind spot monitoring system, which is constantly activated. So there's small little points over here which I just thought I should highlight in the review, just having driven the MG3 Hybrid Plus, and when I'm comparing and contrasting it to some of its competitors and looking at some of the alternatives that one might be able to attain, albeit at a more expensive price tag, I do feel here that MG could have refined the interior all that little bit more. Speaking of which, I had high hopes of the manufacturer optimizing its infotainment system, but very much like other MG vehicles that I've reviewed, the MG3 Hybrid Plus's 10.25-inch display is a little bit sluggish, be it in terms of opening certain menus or even if you're using the climate controls. And yes, in case you're wondering, they're all digitally done, so therefore it can be quite cumbersome when you're on the move. Nonetheless, it is great to see that MG has included Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support over a wired connection, and therefore gives you a bit more of a snappier feel if you're using the likes of Google Maps or Apple Maps, among other things. Now, this does also bring me on to its audio system, because here you'll get higher quality playback if you're plugging in your smartphone and therefore using music that is stored within it. And in this respect, you have got a 6-speaker configuration. The audio system itself will do a decent job across the sound frequency range, but won't exactly excel, and audiophiles will be left a little bit disappointed, specifically knowing that there are no upgrade options that are available by MG themselves. In fact, if you want a detailed breakdown of the audio system and want some more information about the in-cabin measurements that are recorded, make sure you check out my audio review that can be found up on your pop-up banner or by following the links down in the description below. Now, for you to attain the highest audio fidelity, you want to plug in a USB or your smartphone, and this can be attained via the singular USB Type-A ports that's found towards the front of the center console, or the USB Type-C port. This actually resides next to a 12-volt socket, which will provide power to, for example, a dash cam. In case you're wondering, there is another singular USB Type-A port towards the rear of the center console for your occupants. Now this actually does perfectly bring me onto storage, and the glove box itself is relatively narrow, but will certainly suffice for taking any sort of important documents. As for the center console, it's actually been optimized by the manufacturer. At the front, you have got a small little non-slip area. Further down, you've got two cup holders with a small little plastic insert which can be removed. And then further down, you've got a small retractable and movable area which reveals extra storage, and again, these small little inserts that can be removed if you do want to customize it. This is normally what you'd come to expect in much more expensive alternatives, so it's great to see that MG has actually thought about how the storage is actually laid out within the MG3 Hybrid Plus. Now as for the door bins, the front two will certainly suffice for taking a 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium sized valuables, although it's worth noting over here that it's not being lined in any sort of fabric, and that if you have a reusable 500ml bottle, it will actually flop down if you do not have any sort of goods that are residing behind it. As for the rear two door bins, they're unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. So what about when it comes to its boot? Well, here you've got 293 litres to play around with, or 983 litres if you drop down the seats, which is very comparable with other vehicles of its class. You've also got a hatchback design and an underfloor compartment, which is useful if you want to compartmentalise your boot. However, it's worth mentioning over here that you do not have an electric tailgate. There's a raised boot lip, which makes it a little bit more impractical, and you've not got a flat floor. Indeed, there is a bit of a lip between the rear portion of the rear seats and the boot floor itself. Furthermore, I do find it quite surprising and disappointing that the entire second row folds down only. Indeed, you've not got a 60-40 rear split folding design like you'd find on some rival alternatives. And this means that if you're going to be taking, let's say, a larger size suitcase, a cabin bag, and two occupants, well, it's just simply not going to be plausible within the MG3 Hybrid Plus. And indeed, this is because that entire second row folds down. If the manufacturer had included 60-40 rear split folding seats, at the very least as an option, it would have been very much appreciated, as it would have added a bit more versatility to this vehicle in comparison to what else you can find out there on the market. Furthermore, when you are putting back the second row, you have to bear in mind that there are no seatbelt runners. As a result, it means that it's a little bit of a faff to pop it in and out frequently. Now, because of this rather peculiar design, you've got no rear cup holders or indeed a pull-down armrest for your rear occupants. Now, when it comes to the overall headroom and legroom, however, it's actually pretty impressive, at least for a vehicle of its size and class. As someone who's just under 6 foot, I've got no issues whatsoever at the front or rear of the cabin. Sure enough, the overall legroom is a little bit tight given the fact that you can't fully extend your legs, but it should certainly suffice for shorter journeys, or of course if you have younger adults or children. It's also nice to see that the rear footwell design has been optimized to a certain degree, because the transmission tunnel is not oversized like on what you'd find on alternatives out there on the market. Better still, the seats are all very comfortable. They're accommodating and soft and had no issues whatsoever on longer drives. At the front, you have got 6-way manual controls for the driver, while you've got 4-way manual controls for the passenger. There are also heated seats and also a steering wheel in the trophy trim only. Now, you might have clocked in that I completely omitted a sunroof, and indeed that is because it is not included, at least in the UK variant of the MG3 Hybrid Plus, at least at the time of filming. Now, this does actually bring me onto its exterior design, which I actually really love. The vehicle actually reminds me of the MG4 EV, which in itself is also reminiscent of some other supercars and sports cars out there on the market. The front is very aggressive and gives you that sort of nice stance on the road with its headlights, and also even in terms of how the bumper has been designed. While towards the side you've got body coloured wheel arches and side skirts, which is very much appreciated, which sit on 16-inch alloys. These are not customizable, at least not from the manufacturer, but certainly do look the part with the rest of the vehicle's chassis. As for the rear, it's still very stylish, with a nice sort of integrated spoiler and that tail light, which extend towards the rear of the vehicle, giving it a bit more of that snazzy feel. In terms of the colour options, as standard, you've got it in Arctic white. However, if you want a black or 2 different shades of grey or blue, it'll cost you an additional £545. The dynamic red, which is pictured, will set you back an additional £695. In case you're wondering, the rear privacy glass comes fitted in the trophy spec only, while the towing weight is rated at 500 kilograms both for braked and unbraked trailers. Moving on, we get onto safety, and at the time of filming it's not been tested by Euro NCAP, so I've got no sort of crash analysis to share with you. However, I can talk about the plethora of driver assistance systems that come featured as standard. Indeed, over here you've got active emergency brake, lane assist with lane departure warning, which is actually very much appreciated if you're on the motorway, as it saves you from swaying from left and right, traffic jam assist, intelligent speed limit assist, which will also give you a warning if you're going over the speed limit, although can be a little bit intrusive if you live on roads that have not been fully mapped out. For example, on country roads, it'll sometimes think that you're actually doing over the speed limit, when in reality you're actually doing the national speed limit of 60 miles an hour. And then adaptive cruise control, which does a decent job on the motorway, although it's worth noting over here that it does feel sometimes a little bit jerky and can be a little bit harsh when it comes to its braking. But it's good to see over here that you've got stop and go technology, so on slower traffic then it's actually very much appreciated. Then you've got driver attention alert and forward collision warning, which is very much good to see because it'll prevent you from actually ramming into a vehicle. Now, in terms of the trophy spec, it also adds blind zone detection with lane change assist and also rear cross traffic alert. Now, this does actually lead me on to parking and maneuverability, and here it's actually very good. The MG3 Hybrid Plus has got a turning circle of just 10.5 meters, so it's very easy to do a 3-point turn. Furthermore, given the fact that you've got rear parking sensors and a rear view camera, it gives you a little bit more peace of mind. It is worth noting, however, that in the trophy spec, you've got 360-degree cameras, and you can also initiate an indicator function, where in other words, when you're indicating, it will give you the 360-degree cameras displayed on the infotainment system. Although it's worth noting over here that due to the kind of sluggish nature of the infotainment system, it can be a little bit cumbersome, so you might want to actually disable this feature from actually occurring every single time you indicate. On that note, if you're going to be checking for your surroundings, there is some really nice wide opening windows at the side and also a nice frontal vision. And as for the rear, while it is a little bit limited, it is good to see that you've got a rear wiper that comes fitted as standard. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict of the MG3 Hybrid Plus. And make no mistake, it isn't without its flaws. Its interior design could have been a little bit more refined, be it in terms of the look itself or of course the rattle that can be heard at certain speeds. The overall interior tech, while it's very much appreciated, could have been a bit more optimized to make it a bit more snappier. And as for the second row seats that completely drop down, well, that does seem a little bit more of an oversight by the manufacturer. But past these flaws, it is still a vehicle that we can see ourselves recommending, because the overall price point that it comes in at, then in terms of the overall efficiency you're getting from its hybrid powertrain, the overall stylish design both inside and out, the plethora of driver assistance systems that come featured as standard, and also the overall seating comfort and the driving comfort are all very appreciated. As a result of all this, it gets our Best Buy award. Now, we'd be curious to know what you make of the MG3 Hybrid Plus down in the comment section below, and if you would pick it over some rival alternatives. Now, if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.